Hello again. We're raising questions, and as you can see, it's 2020 and it's June of 2020. I'm just trying to show that I'm cooperating with all the experts by wearing that. And I'd like to just raise a lot of questions today, just like the show's title indicates. I have very few answers, and just like to say that it is, again, June of 2020, and the country's in the grip of more change than we've seen in a while. And a lot of people are making really, really heavy intonations about this is revolutionary and this is going to change everything, and boy, in a week or so, there will be paradise or hell, one way or the other. And my feeling's very different about it, but what I want to do today is just raise a lot of questions and not even pretend that I have any answers. Maybe one or two, that's about the size of it, and all very, very personal. Let's start out with the concept of bigness and then go to individuality and the way the country is probably falling apart. At least that's dramatic enough to make it as a theme. So bigness and individuality and the country falling apart, that's enough to do in a few minutes. Now, one of the things that strikes me is that bigness is part of the scene in America and in the rest of the world, much more than it ever has been in certain ways. How are we living? How is each individual living right at the moment? Well, under the umbrella of giant things like Amazon, Facebook, the computer age, the atomic age, very, very, very big things that we have to relate to. We have to relate, especially in our personal lives, to things like Facebook and Amazon and to large corporations in general. And I've been struck recently by my own travail in my own life of dealing with such corporations and wondering why in the world they can't get with it and cooperate in some way to help bring the country through what we're going through, which is not just mass rioting, but also the virus. And we need big units or big umbrella organizations to help get us through this. That's just part of being human. People have always lived under a king, queen, the monarchy and armies and so forth and so on. Somehow or other that just seems to fit into the divine plan for the earth. We need big organizations, big people to look up to and to help organize things. Now we have bigness that is a lot different from bigness before. Talk to any 2-year-old or 3-year-old. He or she knows intuitively what a king is. You read them a bedtime story. Once upon a time, there was a good king. You don't have to explain what the king was, except in 2 or 3 words. You just say, the big boss, or the really great guy, or really great person, whatever. People seem to know inherently that they need something or really like something that is very, very big and that can distribute all sorts of fruits to them, fruits and vegetables, all sorts of good things to them. And now, do we have that? Well, we don't have a king. In the United States of America, as a matter of fact, we have the non-king. Our Constitution, and the Supreme Court probably didn't even have to underline this, the Constitution says we have a president. It doesn't say we have a king, and it doesn't say that the president will serve for life. He has to be elected. It was always he at the time, at least. And so we're still wondering, how can we get, I'm still wondering, how can we get the right kind of bigness to help guide our lives and at the same time avoid the obvious problems with them? We do have bigness, again, Amazon, but although I've had some success in calling Amazon and chatting with Amazon and so forth, there are a lot of other Amazonian organizations, even car insurance companies, that it's very difficult to try to cooperate, get them to cooperate with you, the individual. We are at their service. They are not, as much as they should be, at our service. And even in times like right now, I'm dealing with a medical bill, as a matter of fact, from a gigantic hospital. And the gigantic hospital has said, unfortunately, everybody's at home, working as fast and as well as they can. All the people that I have to deal with, that is, not the doctors, but the people who are in the bureaucracy of the hospital. And we're all at home, and everything's going to go slower. At the same time they say that, they say, you owe us such and such, and if you don't pay it by now, you are in big trouble. It's a one-way street, in other words. Not good. And this Amazonian approach that we're in now, where things that are things like corporations and Amazons and Facebooks are very, very big. They can promise us a lot. This is the point. They can promise us a lot because they are so big. And at the same time, their very bigness means they can lord it over us. Not good at all. And now in the virus crisis, everybody's at home, they're wearing a mask, et cetera, and a lot of things are happening to them and to the country that haven't happened before in such a dramatic way, maybe. I'm raising that question. And looking at my notes, what I wanted to point out here is, yes, we're living under bigness, and we have very, very big commandments, such as stay at home from the government, and we have big commandments from corporations, hospitals, et cetera, et cetera. So where is each individual? Each individual is relatively lost in all of this. And I'm raising the question, weren't things better before? Yes, they were. Maybe not yesterday, but it used to be different. Way before this century, a couple thousand years ago, as a matter of fact, societies were organized along lines that right now we don't really go along with. There was a very rigid caste system, or a system a lot like that, that made sure that there were approximately 4 powerful sectors in each society, with the individual, the worker especially, at the bottom. And above that, above the individual, people like businessmen, businesswomen, and then above that, people like military rulers and government rulers, and then on top, the priest or the philosopher, the thinker. And we look back at that now and we say, oh, this is terrible, it's undemocratic, we can't have that. And actually, I wonder, I'm raising this question, by undoing that, and I'm not pleading for the caste system, by undoing that hierarchy in a society and making it very, very democratic, or at least moving in that direction, have we undone something that might be good about having a natural hierarchy, a natural elite, not an aristocratic elite? I'm not saying that King Ferdinand and then Prince Ferdinand and then grandson Ferdinand, etc., should take over and rule forever. That's not the idea. But can you have some people at the top who belong at the top in certain ways? My answer is yes. Thinkers, maybe even spiritual people, and then below them, other people like the ones that I've already mentioned, the military rulers and the government rulers. Today, and those people above business people. Today, it's almost turned upside down. Business people are worshipped. Look at Bill, the big computer guy. I needn't mention his last name. He's giving away millions of dollars. Well, he has billions, 100 billion or so to give away in the first place. Does this make him so special? And how did he get his money? I don't want to pick on Bill in particular, but on that class of people. I was just reading recently, some guy said that a philanthropist can be defined as somebody who gives back 1/10 of what they stole. Really interesting. To some extent, our society has gone in that direction. They've let people steal from us, from normal, regular people, and they have 90, 95, 100 billion dollars, and we don't. And what I'm wondering is, in the first place, does that send out a message about the society? We put those people, the business people, now at the top. That's my point. And what they radiate is not what the old elite used to radiate, which is thoughtfulness and intellectuality and that kind of thing. Instead of that, it's just money, money, and money, but not really money for everybody. Their message is what matters more than anything else is money. And it's true, money can buy you just about anything, just about anything. But again, going back to my point, society at the moment is organized under gigantic forces that are basically business forces. And what we've lost, instead of having an elite at the top of spiritual leaders or even good governmental leaders, we have business people at the top of the hierarchy. They are bowed down to, and they set the tone. I find that very, very sad. Now, as to what's happening right now, what this leads to, everybody living under an Amazonian kind of structure, what this leads to is, as I was hinting at before, a situation where the individual can find it very, very tough to deal with a big corporation, or as I was saying, a hospital or a car insurance company. All sorts of things can happen. And the paradox is these giant organizations offer and promise a lot. However, when they don't come through, just try to make them live up to their promises. They can say, oh, we're working out of our houses and we've got to work slowly, but you've got to pay quickly. That's at least paradoxical. All right, what else is going on? I'm looking at my notes here, and what I started talking about was, or said I wanted to talk about, was the fragmentation of the country and my fear that the country is falling apart in this atmosphere of phony leaders at the top, again, big guys at the top who really don't seem to know what they're doing. And what we lack is the wise ruler or the wise spiritual people at the top. And as a result of that, it seems to me, we're letting each group, and to some extent, small groups of individuals, determine for themselves how to act in ways that before, decades ago, just a few decades ago, would simply not have been tolerated. And to some extent, that's a great, great thing. Again, back to prop number one, the Supreme Court. In the 50s and 60s, the Supreme Court said, you know what? Segregation by race is wrong. We've got to stop it. That was really great. Tremendous idea. That's when Eisenhower was president. And that was not the Stone Age. That was not that long ago. And since then, we've had very, very rapid change, and African Americans finally have been accepted as full members of the community. That's great. But now I have to ask, has it gone so far that it could be dangerous now? And I'm not talking about black protest or African American movements at all. I'm saying, has the civil rights revolution contributed to a feeling on the part of small groups that they are able and legally justified in creating situations where they can act in a way that is not in the common interest? So in order to put that a little bit more cogently, if I can, the Supreme Court said under the Warren Court and under Eisenhower, there's a group, African Americans, who used to be excluded. From now on, they're not going to be excluded. My point is, has that philosophy also been mishandled so that other groups now say, well, I want to be included too, and I want a really strong voice in the community. And again, that can be okay. Maybe left-handers, for instance, are finally fully accepted in the world, whereas they used to be not accepted. Actually, that's not just a joke. They used to be retrained in schools to write with their right hand. It was very sick. So now we have Southpaws fully accepted as full-scale Americans. Now, what about Northpaws? What about other people, in other words, who ride along on the legitimacy of a minority protest in order to grab too many rights for themselves? What is happening to the common interest? Again, we have giant organizations that want to tell us what to do, but they're not very good at it because they're private. Amazon's a private corporation. And the natural elite, the spiritual leader, out of here. That seems to be something that is not getting the same kind of respect that it used to get. That is the role of the spiritual leader. All right, moving rapidly along. Are there other things that indicate that the country is falling apart? So far I've said that some groups, again, Northpaws, are misusing the Supreme Court's edicts that we all belong. The Supreme Court did not say we all belong and any old group whatsoever can determine whatever it feels like doing. Like the Supreme Court, as far as I know, did not say in Seattle, if you want your own country, that's just fine. And the Supreme Court did not say also, if you want to riot because you think your group has been mishandled in the past, if you want to riot, burn buildings, loot, etc., that's just great. Let's go back to President Eisenhower in 1957. Eisenhower sent in the military to Little Rock, Arkansas. He gave a speech about it from the Oval Office. This was in 1957. President Eisenhower said, "We have a mob, he said, and it is disturbing the peace, and we are going to send in the American military. We're not just going to nationalize the Guard. We are going to send in the military to take care of this mob." Now, when the president even breathes an interest in maybe doing something like that, people are on top of him. What kind of fascism is this? Well, it's not fascism for a good ruler, and you might think the current ruler is no good, but I'm making the principle, I'm making the point about a principle. A good ruler, a good president, has every right to say, I'm sending in the military, because we're under mob rule otherwise. Now, boy, a lot of you are undoubtedly going click, and the show is over. But I'm trying to make the point that even good groups and even good thinking and good protest can definitely be misused. And I'm wondering whether that is happening now and whether the country is coming apart a little bit at the seams, because what President Eisenhower wanted us to do is no longer being done. He said, look, it doesn't matter what your feelings about ethnic groups are. He used the word race. It doesn't matter what your feelings about race are. The law says the following: we're not going to have mobs determining how people are treated. And that's an amazing thing, that a president actually could say, I am going to stop it, years ago. And he did stop it. Whereas now, when a president says that, he's automatically criticized as some sort of fascist or Stalinist. It's an amazing thing. All right, what is the last point? Do we have any other indications of the country falling apart? Well, here's one paradoxical thing that I've been thinking about. Globalism might actually be tearing us apart. We tend to think of globalism as a movement to treat the whole world as one unit, and isn't it nice that we have tourism and trade and this, that, and the other thing now on a global basis, far more than we ever have? Well, it is. It's really nice. But on the other hand, does it have some deleterious effects, some harmful effects of some sort? I'm beginning to think it absolutely does. In the first place, what about this? This is a global phenomenon. And again, people are being heavily criticized, nastily criticized for even thinking or breathing through a mask or not, breathing the idea that the virus could have come from a foreign country that didn't handle it well. Why in the world would anyone criticize that? I know there are monetary reasons. Oh, let's be nice to the Chinese. Don't say virus and Chinese in the same sentence. Don't do that, not even in the same paragraph, because people who say that want to make absolutely sure that their business or the national business is still tied to China. And I think it's perfectly legitimate. Go right ahead and say Chinese and virus in the same sentence. Maybe it happens to be indicative, maybe it happens to indicate something that's true. So globalism is at fault for certain things, and here's the point I was trying to make. Globalism also means that, to make a specific example, let's say a company in Wisconsin says, I want to get a cheap widget made, and everybody in Wisconsin and the rest of the United States is making them at and charging a very high price, whereas I can get them at a much lower price from another country. Well, it's always been legitimate to do that, but now with the globalism trend and fad so well established, I think what it might mean is that the ties between that guy who wants widgets, the ties between him and the factory that makes widgets in his home state, those ties are being undermined, and a lot of other ties as well. When there wasn't globalism, there was more of a movement within each country to have businesses concentrate on the welfare of the country at large, the country that they were in. Whereas now, you don't have to care. Go ahead and order something from another country, and who cares what that does to your countrymen, to factories or whatever in your own country. Now, I'm not saying necessarily that it was always great to have high tariffs and minimal international trade, but I am wondering, again, we're raising the question, has it gone too far? Has it gone too far? And now that we're integrating the world more, are we actually disintegrating the country more? Now, the final question, does any of this matter? You know, you can get really discouraged. I know I certainly do. And I heard the song recently, Where Have All the Flowers Gone, from the early 60s. And the point of that song was, where have all the flowers gone? Well, they've gone to young girls, every one. Where have all the young girls gone? They've gone to soldiers. Where have all the soldiers gone? To war. Where have all the soldiers gone? Eventually to graveyards, and the graveyards go into flowers or turn into flowers. And the whole point is, when will they ever learn? When will people learn and stop this insane process that the world, the human world, for some reason or other, has gotten itself into? I don't know how that relates to all of this, all of the points that I've been making, but after a while you get very, very discouraged, and the ultimate question becomes, can we save humanity or not? And my instant thought off the top of my head is, we're going to have to get the country that we are in back into some sort of better unity and ask for more authority from the top, and try to make sure that the authority that we look at in the future, well, now, not just the future, but now, we have to make sure that authority doesn't come from the top in the form of businessmen, businesswomen. That's not the place to look. It has to come from wise rulers, and they have to look up to wise spiritual, religious leaders. Well, that's the question. Thank you. Until next time.